reason I bring that up is that what's happening so often is that we are here, and instead of being able to talk and find some common ground, we look to win our arguments or win the battle. And I think, frankly, we believe very strongly that the farm community has every right to farm and earn a living. We believe strongly that in Gratiot County, farming and agribusiness run this county. We would a county of 40,000 people. It is the economy, and the farming community drives our economy. But we also know that we have an environmental issue. So we've got to find some happy medium or some medium where we can start to agree on things, okay? The second article, so I encourage you to read that article, and if you know people, we need to start talking, we need to start finding some commonality. What's going to work for the environment, what's going to work for the farming community. The second article was given to me by Garnett Johnson, Tractera, one of our board members, and they now have come out with proof that a degraded, highly contaminated river is impacting property values, both for individual homes and land, but it's also impacting communities. They call it an aggregate. And so one of the things that we're worried about, and if Jim Wheeler were here, the head of Gratiot Development, Greater Gratiot Development, he would say the reason no one's bought the properties along the river, particularly old brownfield properties, is that the river is so degraded and so miserable that no one wants to have that kind of frontage. It's of no value to a business or a residential development, etc. So the second article is about what's happening with property values that are related to degraded rivers, okay? And that's kind of neat because we're starting to see, we can verify that. And if you have a home on the river right now, in a medium sense, you're going to lose $5,000 to $8,000 in value. If you have a home that's, and that's about $160,000 home. But if you have something that's worth more than that, you may be losing $30,000 to $50,000. So it has an impact on not only the homeowner, property owner, but it has a greater impact on the community as well. Okay, so that's why we shared those two with you. The two quotes there, Albert Einstein's quote, if you can't explain it simply, it means you don't understand it well enough. I would share with you that, thank you. Forgive me. Thanks. And I can't explain the dilemmas simply, and that's why knowing some of the farming community, they've been really helpful to me in trying to understand the dynamic, what's going on. Second thing, the old adage, seek to understand before you seek to be understood. Too often today, we are trying to bully our way into positions instead of sitting down and conversing and talking. And so that's the effort tonight, is to try and work together to listen and learn and talk about what are the possibilities and options. Okay? This is what we're about. Septic assistance, annual summer water testing, outreach, farming. It's in your thing. I don't need to continue to read that to you. But it is contextual in that.
Here comes your check, lady.
Sustainability. What's our goals? Our goal is to be good stewards of the river, property, etc. And you can see our mission to help restore the river and its tributaries. Steve and I were talking a little earlier. If you look at the Maple River south of us, the Chippewa River north of us, the Pine River where we live, think about how many communities in Isabella County and Clinton County and in our county, in Gratiot County, that were built along the rivers, for reasons, and love well before us. It started with the Native Americans, but, you know, and now, and what did we do along the rivers? We swam, we fished, we boated, if you had an impoundment or a small lake, etc. And I would challenge you to find those kinds of activities going on in any kind of significance today. Okay? Thank you. That's what we do. I can share with you right now that Mikey Van Horn, Mikey, would you raise your hand? Left hand. She can't raise her right. Soldier, her shoulder surgery. Mikey has worked with 300 to 400 residents along our rural communities and is working to help them understand their septic systems and what appropriate septic practices. And we're really trying to take septic out of the contamination equation, to be honest with you. We know that contamination comes from waterfowl, wildlife, livestock, and humans. We're trying to take the septic component out of it as much as possible, primarily with our rural communities that are on the river. Okay, we go to the next one. We do a lot of outreach. We work very closely with the cities of Alma. We have a dam feasibility study right now. It's a $300,000 grant to study what are the viable options with the degradation that's going on with the impoundment. The second thing is we're working closely with St. Louis because St. Louis's impoundment has been severely degraded because of contaminants the last few years. We're trying to locate those sources of contamination through our summer water testing program. We have met with our township supervisors, our residents, of course, the outreach component, particularly with septics. We work with our county board of commissioners and actually report to them annually. How many LEAP students are here tonight? Raise your hand, Elma College students. Cool, thank you for being here. The LEAPS program is huge and a huge part to us, and we've done a lot of work, research, some of the water testing, etc. And then recently, I'm going to show, I talked a little bit about a group. Sarah, would you raise your hand real quick? Sarah is, thanks, Ben. Would you go to the next slide? So, I guess Ladine and Randon and Grace, would you come on up? Oh, Grace, you coward. Laura, come on up.
Randall's the wife, he's the farmer.
Dan, come on up. Oh, okay, Steve, please. Please have a seat. Make yourself comfortable. Laura represents the State Farm Bureau program as the lead ecologist. Landon, Carey, Pioneer Farms. Dan, Bollinger Farmer, and Cortiva Egg Business. Is that?
Not quite, but I'll explain it.
Ladine Anderson is the administrator for the Gratiot Conservation District, and Steve Sopsey is the Sopsey Family Farms, so fourth generation. So these are the folks, and by the way, Tom Sparks wanted to be here tonight from Sparks Pickle, who also farmed, but he's got the bug, and so he chose not to give the bug to us, so that's appreciated. So those are our folks. If you go to the next slide, let's see. This is what we've done. In 2018, we started this process. It actually ran for almost 2 years. Laura was a part of that process. So was Matt Carey, Landon's father. And we really had a great group of working together. Farmers, all the county farm agencies, along with Farm Bureau. And Eagle was represented. And what happened is that I think it was going so well that MSU got $1 million grant. And they said, would you be willing to roll your folks into our $1 million grant because it's about farmer-led work groups in helping to solve some of the environmental issues impacting our waterways from our watershed, Upper Pine River watershed, all the way down to Saginaw Bay. So it encompassed a number of watersheds. So what happened is that they got together, we turned our group over to them, And then COVID hit. And MSU had a hard time meeting. They actually asked for an additional year extension. It just didn't go anywhere. So we did not see any fruition out of that process. So we're trying to rebuild that process again and create this relationship between the farm community and the stakeholder groups that represent our counties and our watershed. So, thanks. This is some of the research you get on our website. Lots and lots of research, and it's important kind of stuff. We know what's happening to the river. We now have a 20-year summary of the water testing and the contamination over time. So we can you can read that as well. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about Sarah's group. This is important to me for this reason. I had my days. I grew up on a lake. We had a speedboat. We swam almost daily. We fished. Not unlike a lot of folks who have lived on the rivers in our area or lakes. We don't have many lakes, unfortunately, but we have some impoundments. And what's happening is that I was able to do those things, but kids can't do those things today. We have 5 city parks within either that border, in St. Louis as well, that border the river or the impoundments that the dams have created for them, small lakes. And do you see anybody swimming? You occasionally will see some fishing going on. We also know that fishing is a little bit can be jeopardized due to the E. coli issues. But you're not seeing any power boating, not real power boating, but there used to be ski jets, things like that going on. That's all changed dramatically. The state has said to us that the waters of the Pine River are so contaminated that to come into human contact with the water, you jeopardize your health. 300 million parts for partial body immersion. You jump in, it's 1,000 parts per million contaminants, E. coli, and those issues are way, way above that. We have places in our watershed that are 20,000, 30,000, etc. So it's crazy. My contention is that if we don't start to have the conversations and don't start to see progress in what we're trying to do for our kids and our grandkids, then I think we failed to be stewards of the land and the resources that we've been given and we benefit from. The very last page is our real goals, and they're goofy goals. But I want to see more kayaks and more fishing. I want to see a St. Louis Derby where kids don't have to cast beyond the vegetation and algal blooms. I want to see if people are comfortable about eating the fish that they're catching. I want to see people canoeing the Pine River Canoe Trail, and on and on and on. And most of all, within 2 blocks of our downtown area, we have some prime real estate that would be wonderful commercial and residential development. That's not going to happen unless we do something about the condition of our river and our impoundment. So, with that being said, there's a cheat sheet that we handed out tonight, or that you picked up, and the questions are kind of interesting. What I'd like to do is to share with the panel the first 2. What do people or the public not understand about the farm community regarding the care of our environment? I believe very strongly that the farmers have been the stewards of our land more than anybody for decades. What is it that we don't understand? Number 1. 2, are farmers generally aware of the levels of contamination within the Pine River? So, Steve, would you be willing to kind of start us out and just kind of take a look at those and see what you can share with us?
This page?
On the back.
Backside questions, yeah.
Backside, any questions?
On the bottom.
Oh. I'm Steve Sapsey, County Commissioner. I'm District 4, which is actually the opposite of the county where we are. I have the 4 townships across the bottom of the county, and then I come up the west side, which is how I get a little snippet of the Pine River is in New Haven Township. And when I first became a commissioner, I was asked to join Ladine with a group that was working on the Upper Pine River Management Group, as I believe it was called, the Upper Pine River. So anyhow, that's what, I mean, I've grown up in this county, lived here my entire life, so I went to all the county fairs, all that stuff, because I'm a farm kid, and, you know, it wasn't until you actually start hearing about it, then you start actually looking at the impoundment, and you're like, wow, it really has changed from when I was a kid, and it was out of the fair, and you went down to the park to go swimming, or, you know, there was people always down there recreating, and now that's not the case anymore. So, what do people public not understand about the farming community regarding the care of the environment? I mean, I think Chuck hit it best when he says, you know, farmers are the original, I guess, caretakers of the land. Obviously, things have changed throughout history. If you think back to the prairies and how they originally started farming down to the way things are farmed today, vastly different on how they're doing things from then to today. Although it still seems like, you know, we're still doing the same thing, it's very different from the way it was done. I mean, some people use moldboard plows and things of that nature today, but, you know, everybody knows what John Deere is. That's what he became famous for, was a moldboard plow. They're not hardly used. In fact, John Deere Corporation doesn't even build one anymore. You know what I mean? So that tells you how some ag practices have changed. But I think this has been a problem for years, is people, as our populations have migrated from, you know, you go back 100, 120 years, everybody for the most part lived on a farm or had a connection to agriculture. They had just left that farming community. Now, we're generations out. People, if you ask them, did your family farm at some point in time? They have no clue. You know, they think milk comes from a store. You know, all field corn is sweet corn. It's, you know, there's people just don't understand agriculture like we once did. And I think that leads to some of the misconceptions and things. I'm from a very small family farm. In today's scale of farms, I'm from a very small family farm. And I've had a lot of talks with Chuck about, we have some, I live not far from the Maple River, but we have some highly erodible land. So years ago, I remember as a late elementary, middle school, my dad bought the first no-till planter in our area. And, you know, all of the, you can only imagine, 12 to 16-year-old boys that were all farmers, and they're all like, well, you can't do it right, why are you doing that? And dirty farming and all that stuff. Now, the ones that still farm all have no-till at some point in time, or still do it to a degree, or minimum tillage. But anyhow, it's just how things have changed in society with it. I think your second question, are farmers generally aware of the levels of contamination in the river? I would say probably not to the degree of what it is. Obviously, you drive by it all the time and you see that the impoundment has changed, but I don't think people realize, as Chuck and I were talking about while we were eating, how much soil is in there. I mean, there's contaminants in there, but a lot of what's filling that up is just our topsoils. And that comes from farming practices. It comes from wind erosion that has nothing to do with, you know, if you have highly erodible soils, they can be covered with vegetation and landscaping, and they still blow and they get into our county road ditches. Those road ditches go to your county, or to your county drains. The county drains go to your major tributaries that go to the river, and that sediment all ends up in there. There's no one thing. Drive down a gravel road. How many people drive down a gravel road? All that dust that flies up, some of it settles in the ditch. When it rains, the ditch runs to the next ditch, which runs to the river. It's all part of the problem. It's not one area. But, you know, I fully agree. Agriculture plays a role. When you're in the spring and lots of ground's been tilled up and the ground or the air almost looks dirty, from the dust that gets rolling and blowing. I mean, we think of the dust bowls that you've read about in history from Kansas and what have you, but it happens on a miniature scale every year. You know, the same thing happens when people build homes or they redo their lawns and all of that stuff. It happens. Construction sites, we talked a little bit about that. So the facets of this, but I truly don't believe a lot of people realize just how bad the contamination is in the river. Most people, I think, would be alarmed to find out, you know, it's safe to go swimming at 300 parts per million. We're at 20 to 40,000. You know, I mean, they're talking about a drop. When you read some of these articles and they talk about if you're fishing, don't let a drop of the water get on you. That's like, what? You know, how are you supposed to do anything? You know, that's the scary part, that it's that bad. And I think, you know, so for me, I think that's the thing with educating everybody, not only educating the general public about agriculture and what we're doing and trying to do, and but also educating the farms and farmers about how much pollution is in some of the water. I think our DNR or Eagle, whatever, however you want, I mean, the deer population has exploded. How many people had to swerve through one or hit the brakes tonight on the way here? I had to, Dan, I don't talk about it. You know, it just happens. I mean, I had to travel quite a little farther for people to get here, but it's just, you know, that also gets in our runoff. I mean, we've talked about that, the wildlife population, and it gets into, we talk about it at our meetings, and some of the findings, it's wildlife stuff. And that needs to be controlled better than it is, because that's where they live. That's their home. So I really think it's multifaceted. I really think that I belong to some, like, I get emails and stuff about no-till and minimum-till farming because it's near and dear to my heart. But the amount of acres in the country is growing. There are people who are engaging in that, but it's kind of a take it or, you know what I mean? There's people who are either in it, they're in, or they're not. It's one kind of thing or the other. And even though a lot of farms maybe will plant soybeans no-till, or they don't fully no-till their crops. So it's a give or take from year to year how many acres are, and then there's some who are dedicated, and that's all they do. They never till their ground at all. So I think some more education about those kind of things. I think, to be very honest with you, I think our federal government is going to have to be involved. We've talked about this a lot. Some of your most fertile farmland is what's right next to the river, right? River basin dirt is wonderful dirt. They used to have some filter strip programs. Well, there are still filter strip programs, but you make so little money on what they want to pay you for a filter strip. Why would you filter strip? I mean, if you can grow 70 bushel soybeans and sell them for $10, for easy math, $10 a bushel, that's $700 an acre. But we want you to leave 100 feet or 150 feet all the way. You know, if you have a river, usually it's not just a little slice of it. Like I have a county drain that runs all the way through the whole farm. So we farm on both sides of it. You know, so you're talking mile on each side of this thing. So if you start getting, you're taking a lot of acreage out of your production. That's where I think we're going to have true help from a governmental entity. A group like this, no way we have the funding source to do it. It's going to take, if the government wants to get serious about cleaning up our watershed, and from the research that I've learned about, filter strips make a huge difference in filtering out a lot of this stuff that we're talking about. So I really think if we want to make some true headway, they're going to have to make it worth someone's while to do it. Not that they don't want to be environmentally friendly, but they want to be profitable. You got to be profitable so you can stay in business and survive. But I mean, and you can't even pay your taxes with what they're proposing to give you. It doesn't take a very much of a businessman to figure out, I'm gonna farm it, you know. It's
Gene, is there still a program that subsidizes photo strips? I thought it was dead.
That would be an NRCS question. That's not run through the conservation district.
Okay.
Yeah. Chuck, if you don't mind me jumping in, I can answer that.
Please do. I don't know.
Okay, because this is something that we've been fighting pretty hard for. We got a lot of confusion out of the one big beautiful whatever budget bill that was passed this summer, in which there were some farm bill programs, and that's where money to help farmers with financial assistance to do these conservation practices come through. It's through the farm bill. So farm bill, you've got your food stamps, you've got your crop insurance, you've got your conservation programs, which are a teeny tiny little sliver of that huge amount of money. Not many of the programs were included in the budget bill that was passed this summer. What we did get in the deal that was struck just yesterday to reopen the government is a 1-year extension of current NRCS programs. So we're going to continue to have those financial assistance programs at their current level, which means that they don't increase for inflation. The funding's not being increased at all for the rest of this year and through 2026 until next November. That still leaves a lot of those programs in a high degree of uncertainty because they didn't have enough money before all of this started.
It's, and I think what Steve alluded to is it's just not profitable or doable as a farmer to have photo strips of the sizable and impact the environment. Hopefully, I mean, it's just when you can farm that.
Sure. Yep, and you know, and the thing too is, this is a very interesting conversation because I just got back late last night from a meeting with EPA in Columbus, Ohio, where we were talking about Ohio's Lake Erie programs. They've been having a lot of the same challenges that the Pine River has been having. Huge watershed, lots of agriculture, lots of problems with algal blooms. And what it typically comes down to is every acre of a farm may only be losing a tiny bit of phosphorus from their fields, but when you add it up across a giant watershed, it ends up being a lot of loading into those lakes. And so the research there is really focusing on what actually are the most effective practices to reduce loss of phosphorus and loss of nutrients into those waterways, because if we're going to be constantly fighting this losing game of not having enough money to supply the financial assistance that we need to be able to allow farmers to take land out of production, I mean, that's cutting into your paycheck. Anybody want to give me one of your paychecks this month? You know, that's what we're essentially asking farmers to do when we ask them to implement these conservation practices. We want to make sure that that money goes toward the most effective practices that we can. And just like your quote earlier, you know, if you can't explain it simply, you really don't understand it. We still don't have a solid understanding of what are the most effective practices. Do filter strips work? Yeah, in a lot of cases. Not everywhere. Do drain control structures work? Yeah, they do, but not everywhere. So a lot of what we're trying to figure out here in making the most effective conservation decisions is still science that is developing right now.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, I kind of derailed things. I think we were going to go to the questions that were being answered, and I think we were. Steve, if you got anything more that you were going to cover?
I really think that those are science that's proving what is the most effective, and then having a fair compensation. You know what I mean? That's truly, I believe, the answer. Because if someone comes to you and it's like, we know that there are pollutants getting into, you know, in my case, into the Maple River from our farm, and this practice works, well, sign me up as long as it's not going to, you know, I mean, I want to at least be able to keep my head above water. I don't want to, you know, like he said, I'm the 4th generation, you know, 5th generation my kids hope to be blessed with grandkids that will be the sixth generation to be there, and you're like, but if you take away any form of being able to have income, that doesn't work. I mean, I don't want to burden my kids with something. I want to bless them with something, and not burden them.
What do you do with, in most of the research that we've done with the state's testing protocol, sharing, and this is not meant to point fingers at all, but it's just sharing that probably manure application on the fields and then moving into the drain tiles and then hitting the county drains and then into the tributaries and the river it's an expedited process, if you will. In the olden days, we generally put solid manure on, it leached down into the aquifers that are 100 to 200 feet below ground and was cleaned by then. But now it's leaching how far? 2, 3, 4 feet, depending on the distance of the drain tile, the depth of the drain tiles. How do we handle that? Because I understand the drain tile purpose is to remove excess water, right? But it also complicates getting the contaminants into the waterways more quickly. What can we do about that?
There's several things. And again, very site specific because every farm is different, every soil type is different, every slopes are different, what you're growing is different. I think the first thing to establish is, number one, manure is hands down the best nutrient source that you can use for growing crops. It has complete nutrients. It's not just the majors. You think about your major nutrients that you need, phosphorus, nitrogen, potassium. It's also got all your micronutrients in it too. As well as it is a really effective way to create sort of a circular process in which, you're feeding your livestock the crops that you grow, they're excreting out their waste, you're putting that as nutrients onto your field that you're using to grow more crops. The challenge is, how many people here have heard of the 4 R's? Right source, right rate, right place, right time for applying your nutrients. That's, if you would just want to take it straight down to gut simple elementary level, that is what we really need to focus on for how we handle our manure. We've got to make sure, from my perspective, you need your fertilizer sources. You need your chemical fertilizers for the crop that you're growing, because while manure is great, it kind of is what you get. If you need more nitrogen because you're growing corn, which needs more nitrogen than soybeans do, you're not going to get more nitrogen out of that manure. You've got to supplement it. So I definitely, particularly because we've got some folks here who may be involved in some of the fertilizer business. That's not to trash them, but what we need to make sure of is that we're putting it in the right place. Generally, that means we want it to be close to the crops. We want it to be subsurface applied so that it gets maximum attachment to the soil and availability to the crops. It means we want to do it at the right time, which is as close as possible to when those crops are going to need those nutrients, and we want to make sure that we're applying it at the right rate. And so we encourage farmers of all sizes to get their soils tested, to test their manure, to make sure that they're applying at a rate that the crops need. We require that all CAFOs do it. That's why they have those gigantic long permits, and they have to complete these comprehensive nutrient management plans because we require that to be done there. I think there's better ways that we can do that. I think there's better ways that we can look at how do we find the right balance of, we want to minimize our tillage, how much we disturb the soil, because the less you can disturb the soil, the better. But I just said that you want to incorporate your nutrients, which means that you got to get them down underneath the surface of the soil somehow. So we've got to find that best balance. We've got to make sure that we make it possible for farmers to apply at the right time, because what happens usually in the spring around here? Rains a lot. We don't want to apply in the rain, and again, with permitted CAFOs, they're not allowed to apply during the rain, and they're not supposed to apply if there's rain that's predicted within 24 hours. Does a surprise thunderstorm come up? Sure. But the point is, we've got to provide better tools to allow them to find those balances better. We've got to find out, are we getting the right amount of nutrients in what we're doing? Can we do better with technology to be able to precision apply our nutrients, whether it's manure or fertilizer, to make sure that it's exactly where and when the crops need? And if it's wet in the spring, when's the best time for us to be able to apply those nutrients? We can't apply it in the spring right before the crops start growing, and you don't want to crush your crops by applying it in the summer while they're up. And if you apply it in fall, that's a really long time before your crops start growing. That's a tough problem to solve. And so that's why I say we're doing research on this, and the answer is not necessarily going to be simple. I mean, if it was simple, we would have solved it already.
I think I can help with some of this conversation. And one thing I feel the need to clarify is with drainage tile, the goal isn't so much to take all that rainwater and just get it out of the ground. The goal of drainage tile is to lower your water table and promote root development down to a lower level. Now, your soil has a certain amount of water holding capacity, and that tile takes that excess, what your soil can't hold. You take something like a sandy hill, you're typically not going to have tile up there. Your trouble is keeping water there, not getting it away. And that is also some of your highly erodible, highly leaching soil. So I wouldn't completely contribute tile to the leaching. And I've had it drilled in my head as long as I've been trying to make decisions, is phosphorus does not move in the soil. And we have soil tests going back 30 years that say it doesn't. We have spent years trying to get levels down from, say, we took over a farm that was right next to the barn, or it was an old barnyard lot. And those areas typically will have a very high concentration of phosphorus. And we have spent years and years trying to get those levels down, because since we are a permitted CAFO, we cannot spread manure on ground that has over 150 parts per million of phosphorus. So we are always keeping track and required to, at a maximum, go 3 years without testing the soil for nutrient levels. And there's also that one thing that's in the headlines anymore is the price of fertilizer. And like you said, the right rate, the right time, we are trying to maximize our manure use as best we can because it makes economical sense. We are trying to essentially front load our manure before the crop grows so that we can harness as much of those nitrates and those phosphorus and all the potassium we can and keep it in place and uptake it before it can go anywhere, because that just makes a higher fertilizer bill for next year. So that's nutrient management is a very important thing economically and environmentally. So it's always a consideration that we are not over applying, but applying the right amount.
Dan, you work with a lot of farmers, I think, at least in our conversation. What are you hearing from folks as far as concerns regarding the environment, things that they need support with, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, but before I answer, I'll give you my background of why I'm even up here. Because I'm not here to represent my employer. I'm on the Conservation District Board, and I'm not representing them. I'm here as happen to be a Gratiot County citizen for almost 30 years, but not in the Pine River watershed. And I spent over a decade in extension, and a big part of that was part of the early development of the Michigan Ag Environmental Insurance Program. I was heavily involved when there was concern specifically about the field tiles and manure, and was on a lot of statewide committees that I think you sit on now, and things of that nature. And for the last 18 years, I've been basically in the seed business because, well, we can get into that in a side conversation why I switched. As far as what what I think is relevant for the conversation tonight is a very realistic and practical challenge that farmers deal with in a lot of things that have social, environmental, and other challenges associated with them. And that is, there's a lot of contradictions in what is expected. For instance, the field tile thing. If you want to assure it's not going to get to the field tile, you know what you do? You till it. You tear it up, and you take all the macro pores and take away the soil structure so the water can't permeate. But now, we've got concerns we're not doing no-till to conserve the soil structure. We're not doing, what the latest terminology is for improving soil health. And so there's a negative to that. The flip side is if I do no-till, okay, now you better be prepared to smell manure because I can't incorporate it. So there's all these contradictions that, depending on who you're talking to, the farmers are expected to do this. Well, that person will be happy if you do this, but that'll make this other person unhappy, and they feel like they can't win. And that doesn't get us hardly anywhere, because why would I want to cooperate as far as doing things? And they want to do things. The intention is to be good stewards. And I think there's practical economic benefits as well. For a lot of reasons, it doesn't make sense to do things wrong. But there's so much pressure from opposing directions that it's really difficult. And I think the level of trust between a lot of farmers and those that, are basically critical of their practices has been lost. And it may not apply to anybody in this room, but it has been done at such a high level. When I was back heavily involved, some of the biggest fights in the state over manure, you know what they were about? One I found out was a local love triangle. That the one that got left out had a vendetta against the farmers because they were a farmer. Okay. Another one I found out that there was a side conversation with somebody who was leading a major effort against animal agriculture, and their concern was they were asked point blank, "Don't you care about that if we can't farm here, they're going to have to tear down rainforests to feed the world?" And they said they don't care. They just don't want it built behind them. So this is the perspective that you hear, and then when you're stuck in a situation where you're making a livelihood off of it, it's really hard to get excited about, going down these things that are beyond what, you naturally can do to maintain your business, your family, and still know that you're doing the right things. And there's a lot of other contradictions. One outside of this that I deal with, because I'm in the seed business, is, for instance, there's a perception that genetically modified plants are a problem. So there's a push towards non-GMO crops, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that option. But you know what the first conversation is when I work with a farm that wants to go non-GMO? Pesticides. Because now we have to be much more intense with the chemicals because we don't have the things that we build into plants to control insects and to use less dangerous chemicals for weed control. So look at that contradiction. I just did a meeting with an international group 2 weeks ago, and it was all about conserving nitrogen and stuff. And they were wanting to protect it. That's great, and that's what I was there presenting on. But simultaneously, that group is non-GMO. They make all their farmers be non-GMO. What a contradiction. You say you want to protect the environment, but yet you're requiring them to use more pesticides. And that's where I think it's a real struggle to solve these challenges, because if you're sitting in the farmer's shoes, and I can't speak for anyone here, but if you're in the farmer's shoes, what would you do if everybody has contradictory views and a lot of them don't even make sense? I'll stop. That's why I get to speak just for myself.
I know one of the questions that's on the list, it talks about what support and recommendations and and other kinds of things do we have for farmers. And so I'm very excited to talk to let everybody know that the MEAT program, the Michigan Ag Environmental Assurance Program, is still going strong. We are now up over 7,000 verifications for that program. So that's a comprehensive, and that directly is thanks to our conservation district. So you have Ladine to thank for all of her effort and her staff at the conservation district to help farmers get involved in that, because they actually don't get financial assistance to become MEAT verified. This is all on their own. But The MEEP program is a program that kind of looks at all environmental risks. It's not about just nutrients, but it helps farmers identify, hey, where might I have problems on my farm and how can I fix them? And one of the things that Farm Bureau does is that in order to encourage farmers to participate in that program, and knowing that they don't get much financial support for it, we actually offer through our insurance company an insurance discount for participating in the MEEP program. You get a small discount if you start on it, you get a bigger discount if you get verified in it, and if you get verified in multiple systems, you get an even bigger discount. Another program that we've just launched, and this is specifically dealing with the topic we're talking about here tonight, being manure, is we've started in partnership with Michigan State University the Michigan Manure Haulers Certification Program. So this is for both farmers and custom haulers. So believe it or not, there's actually an industry, it's a whole business. You can do this for your job. College kids, think, listen carefully. That you can contract to pick up manure at a livestock farm and take it either to their own fields or to a crop farmer's field and apply that manure according to the farmer's wishes. So the program is for both those custom haulers and for farmers, and it teaches them not only about safety, to make sure that they and their employees are being safe around handling manure, but it also teaches them about environmental performance. And that includes, are you applying it at the right rate? Are you doing it at the right time? Are you making sure that it doesn't run off? Are you making sure to stay away from surface waters? Are you watching tile outlets to make sure that that subsurface drainage is not carrying manure off the field? And so we actually outgrew the facility that we were using to have our annual meeting where we were training folks for this. And so now we have nearly 150 people every year who are now attending this program, and we just started it in 2021. So we're pretty excited that it's starting to grow fast too. And we've convinced our insurance company to start giving discounts for people who participate in that as well.
One of the neat things we did back when we were engaged in the farm engagement committee is that Cary Pioneer Farms hosted a lunch and learn for us, and they are a certified farm, and so we had a number of us who attended that luncheon and were able to work with Matt and what MAPE certification meant, as well as showing us what they did to collect their manure, how they disposed of it, etc. It was a fascinating time, very encouraging. 7,000 in Michigan, that's phenomenal. Thank you. That's fantastic.
Over the last 5 years, that's 1.25 million acres certified under the program.
Fantastic. Let me ask you this. Gratiot has about 23, I think, CAFOs, and when I worked with the water division people, they said that they'll test the soil for CAFOs, but they don't test any groundwater. That's part of it. And that, so my question to you would be just, and this is a little bit tilted, is it appropriate to have 23 CAFOs in a county, a small county of our size?
That's a really good question, and that's what you can really lean on in that case is what goes into a CAFO permit. And I'm sorry, I forgot your name already. I know your dad really likes it. Landon. Landon can probably tell you all about their comprehensive nutrient management plan. But one of the things that you are required to do is if you become a CAFO-sized farm, and that means 1,000 animal units, so it's 700 dairy cows, 1,000 beef cows, 5,000 hogs, some tens of thousands of chickens, is that you are required in your comprehensive nutrient management plan to demonstrate that you either have the land base to be able to apply at what we call agronomic rate, that is, I'm applying at the rate that my soil can handle, that my crops need to grow, and not anymore. That you either have the land base to be able to apply it all on your own farm, or that you can transfer it to a crop farm that you don't own, but who can take those nutrients.
That's the manifesting.
Yep, that's manifesting. So the way that we control making sure that there aren't too many CAFOs all stuck together in one place is that requirement of, hey, you've got to show that you have enough land base to be able to apply this manure, and if you don't get the permit.
If I could add on to the idea of, how many is too many. Right now, I think, I work mostly with dairy farms, multiple states, but heavily in Michigan. And, I think we have around 400, we're pushing 450,000 cows in the state of Michigan. How many do you think we had at our peak, and when was it? We can have interaction. I like doing interaction. How many dairy cows do you think there were? I'll give you a hint. It was in the 1940s. How many dairy cows were in Michigan? How many? Guesses? Just give a guess.
A million.
Higher.
Over a million.
That's a little high. so like 1.2 million cows in the 1940s. And you know those red barns that we get romanticized about? Those were environmental nightmares. Every one of them. The way they were designed, not to mention the health of the animals. Okay, so if you think we need to go back to the romanticized small farms, I grew up on one. Heck no. I'm glad I got out of there. I actually have a life. Okay? And the idea that we should go back to that, it's just a pipe. But the reality is that, when I was involved in some of the committees, it's like, what are we going to do to clean up the environment? And I said this, and I remember, maybe I shouldn't share this because I don't think any of the people that were in the room are still with what was then DEQ. I just said, a lot of the stuff you're worried about will clean itself up if you just wait. Because all these small farms I call them sunset farms. In other words, when this generation's done, they're going to be retired. And all of them that have direct drains that go from their barns to the creek will be dry. All those open lots that I've sat on farms and they thought, when I bought this farm, it was the best thing ever. Every time it rained, it was a flush system. All the manure just washed off and I didn't have to haul it if it rained. I've had people say that. Now, they knew at that time that wasn't okay, but that was by design back then, and that was okay. Those drains, health department told them to do it. Straight shots. Okay? And to sit there and say, we got to fix this, well, those farms can't afford to build new facilities. The only solution is they go out of business. But we don't talk about that because that's not popular. Okay? And if you really want to improve environmental management of manure, you're better off with what's been labeled as CAFOs, and I hate that term because it's a regulatory term that has a lot of negative connotations. It's like name calling. That's the way I feel. So I think it's a matter of perspective. The number of livestock we have in Gratiot County today is a heck of a lot less than it used to be, especially in this quadrant that you're concerned about. The animal density there is not very high compared to a lot of other places that don't have as much of a water impairment issue, which is a head scratcher for me, because it doesn't make sense. So just some things to, kind of put things in perspective.
But the same perspective, using the University of Iowa model on livestock, there was a study done not too long ago where we took the livestock in the county, CAFOs primarily, but all livestock, equaled 1.3 million people without a municipal sewer system. That's an interesting dynamic. I mean, how do you, 1.3 million people in a county of 40,000, because we know cows, I think, poop about 10 times more than humans in a day. I think that's what the study said or something like that. So if that's not accurate, then we should change that and find out what, but when I read that article, I went, holy moly, 23 may be too many livestock farms in our county. What's reasonable to make it economically feasible for those who want to farm, as well as, and I remember attending a meeting in Wynn over Peacock Hog Farm, and there were probably 100 to 200 people there who did not want that to take place because they were residents of the area. There was one person there that did want it to take place, and that was the advocate for the CAFO, who I know, who is a heck of a guy. And then there was the Eagle folks who said you can't stop it as long as the permitting process is filled correctly. You can't stop it. yes, there's soil testing, but no water testing. So some of that doesn't make sense to me. Why would 200 people show up and be very opposed, and yet there's no recourse, no conversation, it's a done deal. So I don't understand that dynamic either, if you know what I mean. That's tough stuff.
It is, and that's the thing, is among the research that's being done to try to figure out, what's the best way that we can manage manure, there's also a lot of research on what technologies can we adopt to help solve one of the essential problems, which is when you've got a lot of manure systems, and beef farms are a little bit different. Their manure is still usually mostly solid. They're stacking it. Same way with poultry. Poultry is mostly dry manure. It's light. You can put it in a truck. You can haul it a long distance. It's not expensive to do so. When you have a liquid manure system, so think hogs, think dairy, they're already producing a manure that's very liquid. And then for their health and safety, we're using water systems to clean out the barns to make sure that we're getting the manure out of the barn and into the storage system. But that makes for a very, very wet product. Water's heavy. It's expensive. It's expensive to haul. It is very, very hard on the roads. And so a lot of the technology now is looking at how do we separate water from the manure to make use of a low nutrient liquid that we can, for instance, irrigate onto a field and not crush our crops. We could put it on at exactly the time when the crops need it, because we could apply it with an irrigation pivot. How could we use a liquid solid separation system to be able to make the solid manure that has a lot of nutrients in it a lot easier to transport so that we can get it to a lower nutrient field? Those solutions are not cheap, and neither is wastewater treatment. I know a lot of folks have said, well, why can't we just act like municipal wastewater treatment systems? And I'd be quick to remind people that we pay a utility bill, every month or every quarter that pays for that wastewater treatment. Farms don't have that. I mean, unless everybody wants to start paying a certain amount per month to the farm to make sure that they can put in their wastewater system to be able to produce the food that we're consuming. But the economics don't work out. So we've got to figure out how to do it in a way that doesn't eliminate farming from our landscape, because just like Dan was talking about with the people who are like, I don't want farming in my backyard, I don't care where it happens. We see this in Europe a lot. They've got some very, very strict environmental regulations, and most countries in Europe have regulated themselves out of the ability to feed themselves. They import their food, and they have exported their environmental problems. And if you've been to farms in South America, if you've been to farms in China, if you've been to farms in other areas of the world that do not have our environmental regulations, they're some scary places. And we've just decided, many of us, that we're willing to put up with that, poisoning other people, so that we can have a clean backyard.
Well, you and I have talked about biodigesters on a couple different occasions, and we have two that have been built in Gratiot County. Can the panel talk a little bit about the good news and Healthy Pine River's taking a posture that we see that as good, that we think it's an idea that's going to cycle up as we go further along, and they're going to get improved. How are farmers feeling about the digesters right now, and is it viable for them?
Mm-hmm. Well, Landon, I don't know if you have thoughts about digesters. I can talk about how wonderful they are, but but I don't own a permitted farm, so.
There's a lot of thoughts, but I have thought about it a lot, and I think that it could be a really just a big tool for any farm of any size. But right now, the current trouble is it's not within reach for an operation of our size. It has to be a large farm that, I believe Consumers Energy just built one of them, and they're leasing the ground, and they own the digester.
Yep.
And it's about the only way to feasibly build one. And an operation of our size could never foot the bill for it and actually have it pay for itself in the long run. before maintenance bills caught up to you.
With that idea, because consumers bought or funded the one in Alto, Michigan in Kent County. And that's interesting because they're taking the methane, of course, and using it in their energy grid, et cetera. But I want to ask you this, Landon, and Steve, same thing. There's a Wisconsin model that talks about a biodigester for every approximately 20 farms. Is that a doable thing in Michigan or something like, or maybe it's 5 people, or, and again, I don't know the dynamics specifically, I just know the Wisconsin model talks about a digester for approximately 20 farms.
Sorry, you were gonna.
You
Okay. When I came in and talked to this group, when was that? It was like a couple of years ago now. Yeah. About digesters, we were just launching some proposed legislation to make that model easier to accomplish here in this state. Part of the problem with digesters is not the way that they operate. It's that the way that they're regulated makes it really, really hard for somebody like consumers to come in and bring in manure from multiple farms to be able to make it worth it for their time and their money. Because, if you build a big digester, it's going to be efficient, it's going to operate at peak capacity. Number one, it's going to cost you about $20 million. And number two, you're going to want the manure from about 10 to 15,000 cows. If you really want to hit the sweet spot for a digester, to make it worth your time. The regulations here don't allow for that. They don't allow for multiple farms to all be sending their manure to the same place. They don't allow for then the digestate to go back out to those farms very easily. And so that's why we launched that legislation, to make that model easier, because we want farms of every size to be able to use a digester, because digesters will reduce your pathogens, so less E. coli in the digestate that comes back out. You're capturing the methane, so you have less greenhouse gas production, because what you're capturing of the methane from that manure means that much less that we have to pull out of the ground in fossil fuels. And then we're able to put it back onto the grid. The digestate, which is still full of nutrients, the farmers get back and can still apply onto their crops, and it's drier, so it's lighter, and it's able to be transported further.
Has there been any, I've heard just a couple of comments about the digestate saying that they haven't validated that it's safe, so to speak. Do you have a sense of that?
Yeah, the main advantage that you get is that reduction in pathogens. I know that there is some research that's going on to look at, are there other reduction benefits that we can get out of that besides just pathogen reduction? But for right now, until that research is more solid, the big thing that I would want to emphasize is you're not really doing much to the nutrient concentration. You're still getting out pretty much what you put in, minus a little bit for the bacteria and the microbes that are in the digester to eat. But pretty much the nutrients that you put in, you're getting back out, but you've got a lot less methane, you've got a lot less pathogens and E. coli. And so that's the big advantage there. The one thing you want to be careful of is that digestate, you have to make sure that you're applying it very, very correctly, because those nutrients are more available. Manure, you put it in the soil, and it takes a while for the soil chemistry to be able to break down the manure to make those nutrients available to the crops. Digestate, it's ready right now. So you want to make sure that you're not just putting it on the surface, and the next rain comes along and it all washes into the creek, and you've lost all your nutrients, and there they go to go make your impoundment in downtown Alma green. So we're going to have to make sure, and we're going to have to be very careful. And this is written into the proposed legislation, that once you get that digestate back, you have to follow good environmental practices to make sure that you are managing that digestate right, so that you don't lose it.
When you and I spoke, Eagle was still kind of dragging their feet.
They were, but the bills have, it's actually a package of 2 bills because of reasons I don't understand, that they had to separate out like the definitions over here and the language over here. I don't know, I'm not a legislator. But the bills have passed the House. They are in the Senate. Now that we're done fighting over the state budget, I'm hoping they'll start to move.
Gotcha. Thank you. No, that's great to know. Are there questions that the audience has?
Lots of questions. just some of the things you've said, you want to plant as close to plant time, makes perfectly good sense. And we've had a lot of aroma in the air around here just since harvest time. Well, this isn't planting time. Doesn't make sense to what you said. The science about how much you're supposed to put on your soil and, and what you all have to do that are, raising cattle or whatever. I've seen some of those permits, and I'm nowhere near, an expert on any of it, and what I'm talking about. But clearly the science is not accurate. And it can't be, because it's affecting us the way it's affecting us. So we're either doing too much, or the soil's not being correctly, or something's not right. And these are things that seem like they'd be easy to fix. There's a lot of stuff that you talked about that I don't have a clue how you might fix some of these things. Phosphorus doesn't move in the soil, one of you said. Well, we know for a fact, you watch them put it on the ground, there's no ditches, it's all underground tile. The fields have been tiled, and we've tested immediately above where it was applied, and we've tested immediately below. And it's way high below and not above. So it's immediately getting to the soil and getting it to the drains. So we know this. There's a lot of things we know. We also know that the only thing that's really changed in our county in the last 20, 25 years is that we now have 23 cables. And we also know that our river has changed immensely. And we haven't really added any septic systems. So whatever was happening 20 or 25 years ago didn't provide us with a bunch of algae in the river. So, coincidence? I don't know. That doesn't make sense to me.
Before you get too much further down your list of questions, do you want folks here to start trying to tackle them?
You can choose whichever one you want.
Okay.
It's interesting that there's regulations that don't allow for a potential solution by having more people participate in having a digester.
Well, and that's actually, you talked about the odor that everybody has noticed. I noticed it when I got out of my car here this evening. One of the requirements that a permitted farm like Landon's has is they are required to empty their manure storage sometime between November 1st and December 31st. Now, the reason for it makes sense, right? You don't want to have your manure storage get full because of the snow, or because of, or because you didn't get a chance to empty it earlier that spring. You do want it to have enough space so that you're not having to apply during the winter when it's not ideal time. But that means that we're ending up forcing farmers, because of the regulation, to apply their manure in the fall, which is better than winter, and it's better than when it's actually raining, but it's not the best time to apply because it's a long time before planting. And it definitely does make for a stinky couple of months for a place with a lot of farms.
Well,
I have one last thing on my
Okay.
So you have to haul your manure unless you're with the guys north of St. Louis up there. They've got plumbing underground now. I mean, why not everybody with plumbing underground? You have to haul it, you pump it right to it, digester, right? But most people have to haul it to a location. Either put it on the ground or put it in a digester. So you're already hauling. It doesn't add that much extra expense to have a coordinated effort.
No, that's why we'd like to make it easier to
So
put
in
that
there lies
Wisconsin
a few
model here in
questions,
Michigan.
And in there lies just a few comments. And we're all about trying to solve the problem, and we'd like to get there somehow.
Well, and from the manure management aspect, I mean, it's big game of strategy, and as much as I would love to apply all of our manure in the spring, and I mean, that is when our barns are full and we don't have much storage left. That is when we are applying the most manure. But realistically, we have a very small window in the spring, and as much as we would like to take our time to put manure on, we are trying to do it as fast as we can so that we can plant. And typically, we will leave a field or two aside for a later planting date just for the sake of putting manure out there and also getting us closer to that window of the wheat crop coming off and spreading. Another thought I had with the drainage tile is I'm just a thought process. It's nothing, scientific about it, but a consideration I would say is that your phosphorus is an element, and it is in your soil, and it is at much higher levels than a soil test is ever going to say it's at. What I believe it says that there's somewhere in the world is 700,000 pounds, or is it 70,000 pounds of potassium per acre, where a soil test is going to tell you that it might be at 400 pounds per acre, but it's not a plan available for them, it's just part of the soil structure. Would it be considered that it's a possibility that that would be your elemental phosphorus making it into the drainage tile? And with the more broad use of drainage tile and farm fields more and more by the day, it's not so much more as making it to the ditch, but more of it is making it farther.
One thing I do want to talk about too, because there is the question about, how much does phosphorus move? The easiest way phosphorus moves is with the soil, right? You lose the soil, you've lost the phosphorus that's attached to it. That's true. One of the things that's come out in scientific research more recently, if you guys will permit me to get a little nerdy here, is that under the right conditions, if you've got a high enough concentration of phosphorus, or if you've got a lack of the kind of elements in the soil, mostly metals, so think calcium and iron, for the phosphorus to bind to, or if your soil pH is just right, phosphorus can detach and it can run off through the waterways. So one of the observations that scientists who are working on this have made is that now that we have the Clean Air Act, and we have a lot less sulfur pollution in the air that's coming down as acid rain, the pH of most of our soils is starting to creep up. And that's not a bad thing. You can still grow crops in a soil pH that's right around 7. 7's neutral. That's okay. But right around 7 is the ideal condition for phosphorus to detach from the soil and start running off. So have things changed? Yes. Are we sure that that's why? I don't think anybody's ready to pin their reputation on that to say, oh, it's the soil pH. Boy, if we just acidify our soils again, we'll be okay, and we'll stop this algae problem. Not to mention, we probably cause a whole lot of other problems. I don't think anybody wants to go back to having acid rain. But there are a lot of complex factors that go into that don't make it as cut and dried as once you put phosphorus in the soil, it always stays there, and it's never going to move. And that said, it takes a long time to draw down high levels of phosphorus. One of the biggest realizations that the folks who are doing research in the Lake Erie watershed are finding is that a huge amount, maybe even as high as 40% of the phosphorus that's going into Lake Erie is not phosphorus that was applied this year. It was phosphorus that was applied years ago or decades ago. It's legacy phosphorus that takes so long to work through the soil system, in through the stream banks, in through the streams, in through the waterways, that we're going to continue to see phosphorus move through those soils for a long time after it was ever applied. So the fixes that we do now can start to resolve the issues, and they're not going to solve everything right away. So all of that together creates a lot more complex picture than just, could we just turn off a spigot and fix it tomorrow?
Other questions? Thank you a bunch. I feel Dan, back to you.
All right. Thanks so much. Well, thanks so much to our panel. We just have a couple of, you're welcome to stay here or sit down if you like. You know what? Just a couple of quick things, a couple of pieces of exciting news. First things first, we have a new office. Yay! The printer has someplace to live now. Our office is room 206 in the Wilcox building. United Way gave us a very good deal on some office space, which is nice because we'll have someplace to kind of use as a central hub. At some point, we'll have a meeting over there, take people to the office, you can see it once we have it all decorated right now. It is, I think minimalist would be going, would be kind. That would be very kind to call it minimalist right now. Second thing really quickly, so we have a new Instagram account. If you are interested in following things, it is my Healthy Pine River. There's going to be a lot of interesting stuff on it. We're working quite a bit. Actually, Dante back here is our new social media coordinator and is working on some fun stuff that will be coming out hopefully in January. I'll also be posting some stuff to it. So if you are on Instagram, give us a look. And there'll also be just some fun photos of the Pine River as well. If you also ever have an interesting photo of Pine River, give us a little hashtag. That'd be useful. A little bit more seriously, I just wanted to let you know that the dam risk reduction grant is up and running. That's that $230-some thousand grant we got from Legal to evaluate the current state of the dam at State Street. Most of that is contracted through GEI, and they are beginning work. I believe on November 25th, they'll actually be doing some stuff here. We will also be taking our January meeting to use as kind of a kickoff to talk about what the process of evaluating the future of that dam will look like, and how we're going to take all the various stakeholders' opinions into mind and really think through what that future looks like. So just something to kind of keep an eye on. It's something we keep on mentioning, but we don't have anything like concrete yet. In January, we'll have a kickoff. I hope you will all be there for it. That's two things. Well, actually, I'm going to turn to Alessandra, who's one of our, I believe, executive assistant to the board, is the title we settled on, but as an Alton College student, has been working on a project that I'm really excited about.
Yes, so I am cooperating with the Clap Art Center at Alma College, as well as the Dr. Borello, who's done the bulk of the research on the Pine River along with Dr. Lorenz, and the history department at Alma to put on a art exhibit that focuses around the Pine River. And not just the Pine River, but that focuses on the history and the research done around the Pine River. So there will be a lot of things like telling the story of the history of the Pine River through art, data visualization through art. So we're compiling a lot of the research that those departments have done, has been very important, and putting it into a medium that is more expressive than simply analytical, that gives people a wider and more accessible avenue to understand that research, because to the point we were talking about, not a lot of people actually know. They can't see it. Unless they go to one of these meetings, they're not going to. But going to something like an art gallery, which is a little bit less abrasive, it's a little bit less scary. Gives people a way to do that in a medium that maybe they understand a little bit more intuitively, and allows people from different disciplines to sort of merge together in a way that would bring attention to this issue.
I think it's going to be fantastic, honestly. I think it's exactly the kind of collaboration that really makes this community special, and will really allow us to take a look at serious issues while at the same time appreciating that we have this beautiful resource in the Pine River. So I think it'll be really fantastic. Looking forward to it quite a bit. Just to give you a quick summary of what we're looking at for the first half of 2026. In January, like I said, you'll have a meeting. We'll talk about the dam risk reduction study and the community engagement process with that, beginning people's input on what should happen with that dam. In February, we're going to talk about these really amazing educational outreach plans that we have for the new year. There's some amazing stuff happening in the schools that is still getting kind of finalized, but we're going to need your help with. and it is going to be incredible. It will really bring some new perspectives to students and teach science in an interesting way. We'll talk about that then. In March, we'll hopefully be doing stuff with arts collaboration. April, we'll be doing stuff around Earth Day and our sort of traditional activities around that. And then in May, we'll be heading into a new season of summer water testing. But I think this year, given the cleanup that has taken place, really largely through Mikey's work around septic systems, around Lumberjack Park, I think it will also be an opportunity for us to really appreciate that that is becoming a more vibrant place on Lake. And that is kind of our plan for 2026. We will not have a meeting in December because I know you're all busy. I will have a board meeting in December, so board members, you're still on the hook. But for everybody else, we won't be having a meeting in December. And so for some of you, this will be see you in January. But before we get to that, does anyone have anything for the good of the cause? Anything going on? Lots of people have. Want to throw a shoe at me? All right, fair enough. I got to be careful with that. I always tell people, say people, they can throw something at me, and someday somebody's going to take me up on it. So anyway.
Well, maybe it'll just be a sandwich.
Maybe it'll just be a sandwich. The aerodynamics are worse than, honestly. Sandwiches, they come apart. Don't throw sandwiches. It doesn't make a mess on the person you're trying to hit. You know, it just makes a mess along the way. Anyway. All right. So if there's nothing, then I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
All right, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Have a wonderful, wonderful Thanksgiving, everyone. And if I don't see you again, a wonderful holiday.